Pottery is one of the most useful tools that an archaeologist can use for relative dating. The use of pottery, however, is a choice. Allow me to illustrate. In Genesis 21:14, Abraham gave Hagar a skin of water when he sent her away. But in Genesis 24:18, Rebekah used a jar to water the camels of Abraham's servant. Why the difference? Isn't it obvious? People who traveled, like Hagar, used containers made of animal skins because they were lighter and don't break. There wasn't 1,000 years between these two instances, and there doesn't need to be any length of time between the first hunting, the first farming, and the first pottery. They were all there from the beginning, just in different places. Let's examine the facts of archaeology and see where they take us.
As the children of Noah spread out in the Fertile Crescent, settlements made clay pottery using different local styles. That changed in 3 places because the pottery was so carefully and artistically made that the styles spread to others around them. It's not clear to archaeologists if they spread because people moved, because they were culturally related, or because they just copied their neighbors. We will look at 3 type sites for shared pottery styles: Halaf, Hassuna, and Samarra. At one time, I thought that it would have been convenient if these 3 major pottery styles had been created by the 3 sons of Noah. That's doubtless not the case. The 3 people who invented and propagated these 3 styles may have been closely related to the people who used them. We can look at these type sites on the map so that it makes more sense. This Google Earth map shows Karacadag, the mountain where farming began. I showed in parts 1 and 2 that it is reasonable to think that Noah pitched his tent in this fertile region and raised animals and crops there. We can see that rivers connect Karacadag to the pottery type sites. Water flows down the southern slopes of Karacadag into tributaries of the Karacadag River. I measured 40 to 50 miles with the white line down to Tel Halaf. If I continued to use a standard travel speed of 20 miles a day, Halaf was only 2 to 3 days away. The yellow line measures out 260 miles to Tel Hassuna, which would have been a 13-day journey. Samarra not shown was another 9 days down the Tigris River from Tel Hassuna. Now that we know where people could have come from, we need to ask who they were. This is my copy of the Genesis record that Henry Morris published in 1976. I've had it almost that long. In chapter 10, he goes into detail about how the sons of Noah can be related to later nations. Shem had 5 sons that became heads of nations: Elam, Asshur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. They were probably all born in the first 10 years after the flood. On page 245, Henry Morris, the father of creationism, makes this statement about the Table of Nations. Even higher critics have often admitted that the 10th chapter of Genesis is a remarkably accurate historical document. There is no comparable catalog of ancient nations available from any other source. It is unparalleled in its antiquity and comprehensiveness. William Albright, the father of biblical archaeology, said this about the Table of Nations: "It stands absolutely alone in ancient literature, without a remote parallel, even among the Greeks, where we find the closest approach to a distribution of people in genealogical framework. The Table of Nations remains an astonishingly accurate document." In the appendix of his book, Henry Morris has this map. He places Asshur, the second of Shem's sons, in Assyria because of the similarity between the names Asshur and Assyria, and others agree. Hassuna is only 15 miles from the Assyrian capital of Nineveh. For all we know, Asshur himself may have moved to Hassuna, built houses, and made Hassuna pottery. Aram is associated with the Arameans, who lived in the region around Tel Halaf. Elam is associated with Susa and the Elamites. Lud is linked to Lydia in Anatolia. Arphaxad or Arphaxad does not have a specific association, but is usually placed in the center of Mesopotamia, which would include Samarra. When we look at a map, we can see how spread out these 5 sons were. They understood that God wanted them to fill the earth by spreading out. Rather than waiting to become overpopulated, they immediately chose regions hundreds of miles from each other. Many of them built in a star pattern, with the parents in the middle settlement and children in surrounding hamlets. Remember this when we get to Sumer, where cities did the opposite. This is part of a Halaf bowl collected by David and Joan Oates at Tel Halaf in 1981. Look at the losange pattern and think about how these people were living comfortably enough that they had time to make containers that were beautiful as well as practical. Archaeologists match pottery by many different characteristics, by what's mixed with the clay, by the shape, by the finish, and by how they paint it. Halaf pottery has been described as having a salmon pink background with lustrous black paint. Classifying pottery is a challenging and sometimes subjective task. The site of Sabi Abiyad, 25 miles downstream from Haran, has been identified as the oldest Halaf site because it has pre-Halaf style pottery in strata below the Halaf pottery. Small markers of the Samarra and Hassuna cultures are mixed in with the pre-Halaf layers, indicating that fine pottery began to the southeast before fine Halaf pottery was found here. Since Aram seems to be the youngest of the sons of Shem, he may have learned the skill from his older brother Asshur. Halaf pottery eventually became the most widespread of all 3, being found from Anatolia to the Zagros Mountains. Hassuna pottery is described as having a cream-colored background painted with linear designs. This is the closest example I could find. Along with geometric designs, it has 4 ibexes painted around the bottom of the bowl. Notice the long horns. Those were probably hunters with spears between them. Ibexes were found in the Zagros Mountains, so those who made pottery were also hunters and farmers. Pre-Proto-Hassuna pottery actually was found in settlements on the Euphrates River. It would make sense for Asshur to have started near the first encampment and then to have moved to the region of Hassuna. Improvements were made. The proto-version was found at Tel Sodo, Tel Magdaliah, and Yaram Kepi. An archaic version was found at Tel Hassuna, along with the final version, which was also identified further east at Tel Shemshara. Notice that these are the facts of archaeology. We must look at the facts before we draw our conclusions. The third of the fine pottery styles is called Samarra, or Samarran, after the type site. It's supposed to have a dark background, stylized animals, and geometric designs, but I was unable to find a picture exactly like that. We do see the geometric designs, which look a little like birds. In any case, these early potters took their time to meticulously finish their work, which cannot be said of those who came after them. As shown on the map, Samarra pottery is found in a north-south direction along the Tigris River. Samarra-related pottery is found on the middle Euphrates River and at Chagar Bazar. This would indicate the path that Arphaxad followed from the first encampment to Yaram Tepi in the region where his older brother had previously settled. After gaining experience there, he continued migrating south. Although Samarra was the first of the Samarran sites excavated, Tel Es Sawan is the most important. Samarra pottery was also found in the lowest levels of Eridu, which means that the earliest settlers in Sumer were from Samarra. I have purposely put off a discussion of the pottery of the Ubaid period because it came later. Many Halaf settlements in the north had Ubaid pottery levels after the Halaf period. We will look at settlements in the eastern flank of the Fertile Crescent in Part 7. The main settlers of Sumer and Babel came from the east. Although the sons of Shem arrived in Sumer first, the sons of Ham took another generation to come from the Fertile Crescent in the east to settle on the unfriendly dry plains of Sumer and establish Babel. We can see this clearly in archaeology whenever we honor the Bible as true history. If you have learned anything about archaeology, then subscribe to this channel to learn more. The playlist Life After the Flood reconstructs a biblical model of life between Noah and Abraham. This is how archaeology works. It uses known facts to create a hypothetical scenario that is open to scrutiny. I have combined conservative hermeneutics with sound archaeology to create a model for biblical paleoarchaeology. You won't find such a clear and detailed study anywhere else. I promise to keep each video short. If you have learned something about the Bible as history and how God walks with mankind, then subscribe to this channel and tell others about it. I'm on a mission to educate everyone about the most ignored, misrepresented, and crucial period of human history. Join me by educating yourself and by telling others about life after the flood.